This is why Thomas Frank wants João Palhinha. He wins duels. Welcome back to the Bowman YouTube channel. Again, another video in this makeshift setup without my computer, but we're doing it. Spurs have signed João Palhinha. Well, it looks like that's happened by the time this video comes out, which will be on Friday morning, most likely. We're just missing a Here We Go at this point. And of course, we've been burnt by Here We Go's in the last week or so, but I'm pretty sure this one gets done. A lot more cut and dry than the Morgan Gibbs White situation, which there will be a video on tomorrow. João Palhinha looks like it's pretty much done. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Please like the video as well. I hope you enjoyed the video that I put out yesterday, breaking down the Arsenal game. Like I said, the more in-depth analysis will return when my laptop returns back from the Genius Bar. Okay, guys? And that will be before the Super Cup, so don't worry about that. And I appreciate there's love and support on the video, even though we're doing it like this. He wins duels. Hashtag analysis. João Palhinha. Let's talk about it. Initially when this signing was first kind of mooted, I was a little bit cold on it, despite being a massive fan of João Palhinha as a player. When we were so desperately looking for a number 6, or desperately should have been looking for a number 6 under Ange in going into that second season, before he made the move to Bayern, João Palhinha was really high on my list because of the 2 amazing years that he'd had in the Premier League for Fulham. No player had won more combined duels and tackles over the course of the 2 years that Palhinha was in the Premier League than him. In 22-23, in his debut season, no player won more duels than him. And in the second season, it was only Bruno Guimaraes and Mohamed Kudus that won more duels than him. So that's starting to make a little bit more sense as well. And I was a little bit cold in it, mainly because of his ball progression, which I'll come on to, or lack of ball progression in his game. And when you compare him to the other profiles of midfielder that we have in the squad, you could argue maybe that, not necessarily that he was too similar, because I think he's different to Sarr, Bergvall, Bentancur, Gray, Basuma, who I think he'll probably be coming in for, with Basuma going the other way, or not the other way, but somewhere else. Not that he's too similar to them, but that he doesn't offer anything different enough to them. And I do think the profile that we are massively lacking in that rotation of midfielders is a deep line playmaker who can play balls between the lines, who is comfortable receiving on the half turn, being calm under pressure and progressing the ball through the thirds, because I do worry that we will be a little bit too reliant on Romero and Porro for that line-breaking passing ability, that ball progression, whether that's short passing or long passing in that first phase of build-up. We've seen Porro kind of tuck into that back 3 at times. We've seen Porro used as more of a wing-back, I think today against Arsenal, or today when I'm recording this video. So we obviously know that Thomas Frank is going to be adaptable, and that adaptability comes into this signing with Palhinha as well, because I think there are more than, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak, right? There's ways that you can get Palhinha into this system to work and Spurs still be a fluent ball progressing side without him having that as a massive skill in his arsenal, so to speak, right? But the more this deal kind of gets talked about, the fact that it's a loan with maybe an option, I'm not sure, that might come out, but doesn't seem like there's any obligation to buy him. Because there were rumours that there was a £45 million bid apparently being readied by Spurs, and I just thought that's too steep for a player that is 30, I think, João Palhinha. And I don't think he warrants spending anywhere near that fee on him, to be honest. But that's not to say that he hasn't got a lot to offer, and I think that the loan makes a lot of sense, especially as a kind of stopgap. Like, I do feel like Spurs fans are entitled to believe that we should go and sign a Belieber or Wharton this summer. Obviously, there was a lot of links to Wharton a couple of weeks ago when Gibbs White first was mooted, and Spurs seemed to be throwing money around like it was going out of fashion. Obviously, talk about the potential takeover or / cash injection. Obviously, with Wharton, it was like, okay, maybe this is something that could happen, but I still think even if Spurs were prepared to bid a lot of money, I think Palace would have turned it down with Guéhi and Eze potentially leaving, and I think they would have demanded over 100 million. When next summer that might not necessarily be the case, and maybe next summer, if Spurs have Spurs have a good season under Thomas Frank next year and maybe get Champions League football again or win something again, then a transfer to someone like Spurs, where someone like Wharton or Belieber potentially would get a hell of a lot of game time, where the 6th position I think is so locked off for like so many of the bigger clubs, with Arsenal bringing in Zubimendi and Rice, obviously Chelsea having Caicedo, and Enzo Fernandez in that position, Man City having Rodri coming back, obviously Gonzalez, Reinders coming into that midfield as well, who am I missing? Liverpool have obviously got Ryan Gravenberch, although maybe they could do potentially one more, but given the money that they've spent this summer, are they going to go and do that next summer on a number 6, given how much money that these players kind of take to get out of their clubs? Maybe not. So I think if it is a stopgap to explore something like that down the line, then I'm happy, especially the fact that it's a straight loan deal. And like I said, that lack of ball progression, I think, it's not a judgment on him as a player. It's more to just say that he doesn't necessarily offer us something that he doesn't offer us something that we're necessarily missing. But maybe it's more than just the duels. It's the set piece threat that he also offers as well. You know what I'm kind of trying to say here? It's not the reason that Spurs fans might not be that excited about him is not necessarily anything to do with him actually as a player. It's more to do with, does he actually tick the box for what this squad is missing? And I totally understand the reservations, and that's why I've been quite like umming and ahhing on this transfer a bit. But it's happening now, and I think there are far more positives in it that outweigh the negatives. And I do think that lack of ball progression is that. I saw a tweet from a Bayern fan who, I'll pop it up on the screen now, saying it was during one of the Club World Cup matches, and he was literally saying, it was like, this is literally my only issue with Palhinha. And obviously Palhinha hasn't played a hell of a lot of Bayern. I'll get the stats up on the screen for his game time over the last last season or so. Obviously, company brought him in. They were so desperate to bring him in the year before, and I do think people have almost forgotten how good he was for Fulham over the last couple of years. And obviously I listed off the stats in terms of his duels and tackles. There was no one better. There was no one better than him. And obviously we were kind of talking, almost people forget about the sort of money that it was kind of being taken to potentially get him out of Fulham the first time around when Bayern were first in. He obviously signed that new contract. So he's a really good player, like a really good player. But the tweet from the Bayern fan was kind of saying, as you would have seen, it was like, this is my only issue with him. He's far too safe in possession. Like when a team is kind of camping in against us, he's too safe. He constantly recycles. He doesn't break the lines at all. It's just always sideways, backwards. And Spurs need a midfielder that's going to offer you more than that. But if you think about those big Premier League games away from home at the Emirates, Anfield, Etihad, Stamford Bridge next season, having Palhinha for those kind of games is really handy because of the presence that he offers you on the pitch, the leadership as well. Like I said, that set piece threat as well that he does offer you. I remember he scored a goal from a corner against Arsenal very early on in the season, a couple of years ago. I think Ange's first season that was. And just that ability to break up play. Like I said, you can also get, I think I just said this in my TikTok just now that I made talking about it. One thing that we saw last season under Ange as well, if you kind of want to kind of find a route around Palhinha's lack of ability to progress the full ball through the thirds. One thing that we saw at James Maddison quite a lot, and one thing that we also saw with Mikkel Damsgaard quite a lot at Brentford last season, is that willingness to drop deep, to get involved in the build-up play. Most of the ball progression from Thomas Frank's men came from the fullbacks a lot of the time as well, but we also saw Damsgaard dropping deep, kind of peeling off the striker to get involved deep in build-up. I remember so vividly the video that I made after Spurs beat Man City 4-0 at the Etihad under Ange. We went there with no Romero, no Van der Ven. It was Dragusin and Davis at centre-back. Maddison was unbelievably influential in that game, not just because of what he offered in the final third. Obviously scored those two amazing goals in that first half. It was his ability to help Tottenham play out from the back against a very aggressive Manchester City press, often dropping into that left-back position, dropping deeper to get Spurs out of tight situations. There are potentially games where you could play a pivot of Palhinha and Maddison. Would Frank do that? Potentially, yes. Or even if you play Maddison in the 10, I think Maddison will be given that sort of license to drop deep, to collect the ball, to get Tottenham out. And then obviously, especially when you've got maybe someone like a Sarr in there or a Bergvall who likes to make those runs into the final third, carry the ball into the final third, or Sarr especially likes to make those off the ball kind of third man runs a lot of the time. He can almost fill in the void sometimes as that number 10, if you like, while Maddison is kind of dropping a little bit deeper. I'd imagine there'll be a little bit of fluidity and rotation between the 10 and the 8 if Palhinha is kind of playing as that sitter. I think if you were to go away sometimes and play Palhinha and Bentancur, I think that offers you a lot. Their ability to break up play is really, really good. I'll chuck in some examples now in case people have forgotten of what Palhinha was like at Fulham. Loves the slide tackle. SZY Comps tweeted that. He's making the Palhinha comp, I'm sure, as we speak. I saw him tweet. There was a flying tackle that he put out against Aston Villa. He put out a clip of it, which I'll put the screenshot in now. He loves that. Really aggressive in the tackle. And Frank wants this team to be aggressive and he wants them to be harder to play against. We were too easy to play against for a lot of the time under Ange. We don't necessarily need to go back there, but it was true. And I do think Frank, while wanting to play front-footed, aggressive, attacking football, there'll be games like we saw today against Arsenal where we're going to have to soak up a bit of pressure. And Sarr and Bentancur, I thought, were excellent in terms of breaking up play. I listed you off Sarr's stats in the video that I made yesterday, or earlier on today, talking about it in terms of his ground duel success rate, his ability to just read the game and then get Tottenham up the pitch. Palhinha will do that, but then give it to someone straight away. He's not necessarily going to give you that dribbling ability. He's quite almost a bit rigid and slow in that aspect. It's not his game. He's just a destroyer, just a cruncher, just a muncher, munches up to the ground and then wins the ball back. He's going to add a lot to Spurs. I do think he's going to add a lot to Spurs in terms of the squad. I don't think he's necessarily one that you start in every single game. And like I said, I would have preferred Spurs to push the boat out on a more all-round option that gives you really good ball progression and makes us less reliant on Romero and Porro for that in terms of breaking the lines, getting Spurs out of the press through the thirds. Because I think that is Paulinho's weak spot and his blind spot. But he probably comes in and becomes the best defensive midfielder at the club purely in terms of the tackles, interceptions, duels won, etc. Thomas Frank, in his pre-match speech to the players, which Spurs put out on socials before the game against Arsenal, he said, right, two things before, I was like, the main thing before we go out, boys, it was like duels and winning those 50-50 tackles. That was his big thing. And I do think that's almost, someone made a separate point to that, which was like, and none's more right than the other. But I think when we saw Ange and kind of those pre-match speeches to the team in the dressing room, it was all, a lot of it was about motivation. It wasn't necessarily tactical, whereas Frank, I think, is more focused on the tactical aspect in terms of those are the final instructions to the players. And that final instruction today, specifically against Arsenal, in a game that, like I said in my breakdown, was played at a real high intensity today. It wasn't the intensity of a pre-season friendly. It was the intensity of a game that actually mattered between the two clubs, even though the result was, it's inconsequential. It doesn't have any bearing on the season next year, although you can definitely take a lot of positives out of the Tottenham performance, which we did in the video. So make sure you can go back and watch that. And one of those was Sarr's role in that deepest midfielder, in that deepest midfielder role, in kind of that pivot with Bentancur. But yeah, his final words to the players, and go and watch it. I'll try and insert a clip if I can. Was, duels, make sure you win those 50-50s. They're going to be aggressive. We need to match that intensity and aggression, and that is what João Palhinha is absolutely going to bring. That ball progression is a blind spot. It is the weakness, but there is so much more. There are so much more positives than negatives to this deal. Spurs need to get a move on in the market. Maybe we bring in another, potentially a centre-back that can give us a little bit more, so we're not as reliant on Romero. But I do think Van der Ven, again, in terms of his ability to break the press more by running through it, if you can keep Romero and Van der Ven fit for long periods, then that's great. A left back, I think maybe potentially, although Spence was excellent there again today. I'll probably do a video, I think, at some point next week, maybe about what Spurs need to do next. Like I said, there's going to be a video on Morgan Gibbs White alternatives, and I think now we can focus more on the number 10 position. I think the fact that we've gone for a kind of lone stopgap signing that is going to bring us a lot. I don't think it's like the cheap option necessarily. I think it's a smart signing, probably driven by Thomas Frank. Maybe that frees up more money to be more ambitious and bring a 60 million kind of player when, like we were planning to, in Morgan Gibbs White, in a more attacking position, a number 10 or maybe a winger. Hopefully that is the case anyway, and hopefully Levy and co do spend that money, because they have given Tottenham fans every right to demand that they do that. Not just because they've shown their hand, but because we should be doing it anyway to build this squad, right? And in terms of building the squad, I think Palhinha is smart, and I think he's going to help us compete on all fronts next season. Like I said, when it was first mooted, I was never against the signing necessarily. I wasn't saying we shouldn't do it. It was more just like, is this actually what we need? But it's happening now, and like I said, I do think the positives more so outweigh the negatives. And I think there are a lot of them. Leadership, that duel and tackle winning ability, that strength, that personality on the pitch. In big games, he's a big game player. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings in a Spurs shirt. And I imagine it'll be official by the time, hopefully, you watch this video, which will be out on Friday morning. Shout out to everyone who watched the Arsenal breakdown. Like I said, Morgan Gibbs White alternatives video coming tomorrow. Newcastle breakdown on Monday. I'm at the cricket, the Oval on Sunday, so I won't actually be able to watch the game live. So you won't be able to see my thoughts necessarily on TikTok or Twitter unless it gets rained off or something, and I'll be at home watching it. But I'm going to enjoy my day at the cricket. I'll do a full rewatch. I'll break the game down for you on Monday. Again, it won't necessarily be in too much detail in terms of what we usually bring on this channel, which loyal viewers of the channel, which I'm so grateful for, all of you will know what we do for those videos. But for now, it's this. And this is why Thomas Frank wants João Palhinha. He wins duels. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best, up the Spurs. Abash.